Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 159. My guest in this episode is Shermin Kruse. Shermin is a globally recognized author, law professor, speaker, and TEDx producer. And in this conversation, we discuss a recently published book of hers called Stoic Empathy. And the subtitle of that is The Roadmap to a Life of Influence and Self-Leadership and Integrity. And I will confess, prior to reading her book, I really didn't know much about Stoicism, except for maybe the first generation of Stoicism and the pre-Socratics, but only by association. So this was a very enlightening book for me. After I got done with it, I feel like I know a little more about Stoicism. And so we talk about that in our conversation. We also find out about Shermin as well, a very interesting coming-of-age story and background and history, and so that's all revealed in the conversation. So I appreciate you all being here, and I will have Shermin back for another conversation, something to look forward to. Thank you so much. And I'd like to welcome Shermin Kruse to the IdeaCast interview series. Probably should have recorded the last 15 minutes where she and I were talking back and forth about things, and always the way, but we're here now, we're recording, and I'll say welcome to the YouTube audience as well and Spotify. Shermin, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. And yes, you guys, and by you guys, I mean audience members, you definitely missed Justin's elaborate explanation of Hegelism and his undying need to understand Hegel and speak Hegel.
I can get
is
the
that like
third...
speaking Klingon?
Yeah.
What is that?
I'll never reach the pinnacle. I'll never be able to read the books. You know, I can get second order interpretation from people, and maybe, but then right. Third order interpretation of the interpretation is probably where I'd be most comfortable. Like somebody really watering it down for me. But yeah, he's one of those ones that you have to really climb that hill, and it's like
you have to for sure. Yes, he's worth it though. He's worth it. He's worth learning German. My gosh, go for it.
Right. Oh, God. My father spoke German fluently. Did he pass it to me? No. My mother's Spanish. She's fluent. She grew up in Venezuela and Spain. Neither one of them taught me a second tongue. So
this is completely unrelated to anything that's relevant to your podcast, but I am relearning French by using Duolingo. And This is not an ad for Duolingo. I have no connection to Duolingo or anything like this, not product placement. But it is true that it is a very effective and very inexpensive learning tool. And so then my 14-year-old daughter started learning Latin. And I thought, well, if she can learn Latin, I can learn Latin. I mean, how hard could it be if my 14-year-old can do it on Duolingo? So this is my decision for next year, is to get to the next level with French and get an introduction to Latin for the first time in my life. I've never studied Latin before, so I'm very excited.
Oh, okay. I have a very feeble, shallow apprehension of Latin by way of botany and horticulture. So you pour through... There are honorific names, and they're honorific binomials for the taxa of the plants, but there's also they're describing something about the plant or the location and things like that. So it gets the little mind curious, and then you go look up what that Latin root might be or whatever it is. And then I have endeavored to try to be competent in Spanish because, as I said, you know, my mother spoke it fluently, so I always got yelled at in Spanish. But the Latin root in Spanish,
there's no greater motivator than being yelled at in a particular
I remember
language.
Every one of those phrases fluently. Yeah. But if she could have gone a little further to some of the, you know, not judging, but anyway. But Latin is so beautiful, and it's alive and well. Everybody says it's a dead language. No, it's in medicine, it's in law, right? And it's in biology. So yeah, it's still there. Yeah. It's just sort of in the walls, you know, as opposed to in the room.
It's in the walls. I mean, it literally is the root of everything. I was thinking, my exposure to Greek has been much greater than my exposure to Latin, but I was thinking, if I can get decent at Latin, then I can very easily jump to Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, right? I mean, because I'll already know English and French. So hopefully, hopefully I can catch up. This is how I plan to spend the next 10 years of my free time, actually, is languages. So come back to me in 10 years and we'll see. I'm excited about it.
And if I had the bandwidth, I'd try to pick a few up and we could go back and forth in a couple. But maybe you can indulge my crappy Spanish at that point, and we could speak
I don't speak any Spanish. My Spanish is horrible. I rely on family members who speak Spanish. My husband's Spanish is pretty good. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. But again, if you undergird with Latin and then I might suggest vulgar Italian. The people's Italian is the closest thing. I always thought it was Portuguese.
Southern
was the
Italian,
closest,
if you will, Sicilian, really, to be very region specific.
Right. But again, they call it, and it's not to mean that they're exposing themselves, or it's just the people's Latin. It's the the commonly spoken Latin is the closest to the progenitor language with the Latin root, and I always thought it was Portuguese, right? And I was nope. Yeah. So you look at the trees and all that, the phylogenetic tree of language, and it's like, no, vulgar Latin is, so maybe Italian. I'm sorry, vulgar Italian. Why do I keep saying Latin? Vulgar
That's
Italian.
all right. I understood what you meant.
Right. Thank you. Dyslexia kicking in. But yeah, the chain for, French is good too. And then I heard Noam Chomsky say one time that French is a little more adjacent to Germanic, since it's in the northern reach of the Latin influence, the sphere of influence of the of that language tree, geographically, like it's closer to Germany. So and I don't understand French enough. I wish I did. That's one of the most beautiful languages.
It is. It definitely is a very, very poetic language. It is interesting because I'm so well rooted in Indo-European languages and Indo-Iranian languages, and so moving to anything that is Germanic was interesting to me. But I feel like once you have English down, German should be approachable. I don't know. This is my plan for retirement. So this is where I am in my life right now. Your podcast audience is thinking this is not what we're here to listen to, and we should start talking about some Stoic philosophy. Although how we spend the final chapter of our life from an existential point of view, an inquiry based point of view, and how we move forward in the development of our understanding of the universe at a time when our cognitive capacities are somewhat decreased, at least in some measures, but take advantage of the wisdom that we've earned. How do we do that in those twilight years? And to be honest, the idea of just, sitting there at the age of 93, barely able to walk, studying some new language is very appealing to me. And it makes me look forward to 93. And that's a good place to be, I think.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because and there are physiological or psychical reasons that you should still aspire to learn an instrument or a language in past your 80s into your 90s, because it keeps the system functioning well. I think if people, and this is not to do a direct correlation to dementia and decline and things like that, but if you retire and you just sit there on your couch and watch wrestling or soap operas,
right?
You're setting
reality television. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that'll even faster.
Yeah, at least wrestling's a real sport. It's an Olympic sport. I'll take wrestling over.
I meant American, like. Oh, the big agglomaniacs like throwing each other out of the ring and stuff like that. But no, I know Greco-Roman, yes, is a bona fide sport.
That's amazing. Yes, I wasn't even thinking.
I was going least common denominator on that. No offense to wrestling fans.
That's fair. No, hey man, go for it. Whatever floats your boat. Everybody needs their emotional pornography. So whatever it is that works for you, that gives you a break, that gets you going. Right. I have zero judgment over it. Right. I feel as long as you're living your life in a balanced manner. So
that's true. You have a pie chart, and the whatever your porn is. Like me, it's airplanes. Like I'll watch planes sometimes on YouTube. So that's amusing. But yeah, you want to fill the rest.
What do you mean? You watch an airplane on YouTube?
It's amazing. There are live streamers on YouTube, and that's all they do is they sit at an airport and just jets take off, right? It's the most mindless thing, but
seriously,
the live, yeah. It's a Zen thing, I guess. Just you're just letting go.
I mean, that actually sounds highly meditative, but it's also a constant reminder that man has figured out how to fly through the skies in a tin box like a Greek fucking god, and that is really kind of an incredible thing. Every time I'm on planes a lot. And every time I get on a plane, I take just a moment to sit in amazement at the accomplishments of man, because, our destruction is all around us all the time. Our hate towards each other, our aggression towards one another, our inability to stay focused or logical or rational or kind is all around us all the time. And every once in a while, it's nice to just sit there and meditate and really marvel at the creature that is man, right? How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty it can be, right? Thanks to inspirations of the last 2,000 years. So, we'll see. It's a good thing to do. I don't judge that at all.
Yeah, no, it is a marriage of it's a synthesis of aesthetic and functionality. When you see the aircraft, they have the liveries, so on the superficiality of it, there is the beautiful paint jobs that some of the airlines put on their jets, and then there is the aesthetic of the shape, the aerodynamic, and then there is the engineering, obviously, to that. Like you said, the wonder of being able to move into flight. So yeah, there's something there when you're just kind of vacantly staring at a plane taking off. But yeah, aviation's always been fascinating to me, I guess, for those reasons, right? It's just a nice marriage of what we can do when we're on good behavior and aspiring to reach for the clouds and all that kind of stuff. So, Shermin, I think I need to do something as a host here. I have to back up a few steps here. And first of all, I welcomed you, but I also want the audience to know that you have an incredible background. You have a very fascinating history. And this is going to run a little contrary to what I said before we hit record. Because I don't want you to have to take too much time to disclose, because I can put links down below, audience, for access to Shermin's history and some of the work that she does. I'll have her TEDx talk in there and another interview that discloses some historical information. But I want to, for the sake of this audience, which is inclined into philosophy and psychology and things like that, you got your undergrad, I think, in psychology, and then you went on into law at Michigan, and so I think that's and in your book that we're going to discuss on Stoic empathy, you really put some pieces together in a puzzle that allows for navigation, functionality, perspectival awareness, and things like that. So if we were to have a sort of formal opening of what is Shermin doing and what's going on your end, if you're good, give us that little history of your educational trajectory and your career trajectory that kind of may have helped coalesce this book or cohere this book into the structure that it is, because I definitely want to then talk about the book that you wrote that we are more or less here to discuss with tangents about other things. So anyway,
it's called Stoic Empathy. Done. We don't have to talk about it anymore. Okay, so honest
opinion, very good book.
I get a buck every time somebody buys it. That's all I know.
I have to confess this to you, Shermin. I think you sent me a review copy, and I acknowledge that in our email thread, but I lost the damn thing. I lost it. So I bought your book. So I am not shilling because she gave me a free copy, audience. I bought the book and I read it, and I do not regret it. And it's not super expensive. $16.
Thank you.
No. This is to you and to the audience, because I don't want to be like, oh yeah, it's a great book, but I got a free copy. I paid for this, and I have no buyer's regret. She could see how excited I was when we got on the Zoom call. I was like, yay, can't wait to talk. So I'm hogging the airspace here, Shermin, but I just wanted to put that testimonial out there. Yeah, the book is amazing, and I want to unpack it. So I'll shut up now and let's find out about your man.
I mean, this is what we were talking about before we went live too, audiences. We were talking about the significance of dialogue and how we learn through dialogue. And that is actually a way in which I'd like to dovetail into speaking about my educational trajectory, because, especially now that I'm pushing 50 now. I have a bunch of kids. I have 4 kids, and developmental psychology is something that's been of recent high level of interest to me, because I'm raising kids, and especially now I'm raising teenagers. And so early education and the impact of early education, I think, is key. And it's interesting because certainly as a parent, we put so much stock in how we educate our young people, right, prior to the age of even 5. And what's really strange about my background is that my formal education up until my immigration and for several years thereafter, so really well into my teens, was severely and vastly and consistently interrupted. And everything that I learned, the way I learned how to learn and learned how to think, was through my familial relationships. And I find this to be a very interesting study in human knowledge and knowledge acquisition, because fourth grade, basically school was canceled at least a third of the time because of the missile attacks. Fifth grade was 1988. It was at the peak of the Iran-Iraq war. I grew up in Tehran, and at this time there was up to 6 missile attacks a day into the city. So schools were often closed, and you just, in your basement there was like a TV, and they had a half hour of literacy and a half hour of numeracy a day. Okay. And that was your education. And then upon immigration, I had 0 language skills. So I moved, I think I could maybe say, count 10 in English, but that was about it. I had no language skills at all. And so the first year or two, you learn to comprehend language pretty quickly in a setting like that. I could comprehend most English within 6 months, but in terms of actually receiving an education in that language, I think it was quite limited to me for at least a couple of years thereafter. So that really takes me to about 13, 14 years old when I actually started learning in English and through an educational system.
Can we pause for 1 second? I think my headphones are doing something they shouldn't be doing because your sound is breaking. I'm going to hit pause real quick, and I'm going to put tethered. So bear with me, Shermin, for 1 second, and audience. We're going to hit pause, so you don't have to bear with me. So I'm going to hit pause. Okay, Shermin, I'm back. I'm tethered. So we'll pick up. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your
doing
support.
Great. You're tethered in a very physical sense, not in a spiritual or intellectual. You're very free in a spiritual and intellectual sense. I can see you roaming about untethered, actually.
Yes, the essence of the spirit, right, is to be the breeze, the wind, the breath.
That's exactly right. That'll
be my thought bubble.
So okay. We were talking about my lack of formal education in my developing years. And then when I eventually started learning in English, being able to actually cogently learn complex issues in a different language and regurgitate them back in an academic setting, I became extremely interested in philosophy and psychology and really all of the humanities, but especially those two. So at University of Toronto, I pursued philosophy and neuropsychology. And the reason I decided to pursue neuropsychology in lieu of just regular psychology is mostly because I understood almost nothing about how the human brain and body function with one another, and I wanted to expand that understanding. So I end up graduating with a BSc. I go to law school, but a lot of my philosophical studies have been focused on logic and argument. And then a lot of my psychological studies have been focused also on just understanding human nature, human behavior, etc. So I go to law school and I am educated for an additional 3 years on persuasion, essentially, right? That is what a law school education essentially consists of. I mean, they do teach you the law to some extent, but really it's an education on how to persuade. And then I came out of law school, and I'm just going to be honest here on your podcast. I had a lot of family obligations at that time, so financial considerations were significant to me at that time, and that's just a reality of the world that we live in, the capital structure that we live in. So I went off to be a lawyer, which I actually really liked, and for 17 years, that's what I did, and everything else I did on the side. If I wrote a book, I did it on the side. If I had kids, I did it on the side. If I got a master's degree, I did it on the side. If I started an NGO, I did it on the side. But I stuck with the law career, which was essentially a career in trying to convince people who don't already agree with you to change their minds, right? That's what the career consisted of, even as it moved into resolution and mediation, until I was finally able to retire and dedicate myself fully to just thinking and writing and teaching, which has been the extraordinary experience of the last few years of my life. And so I say all of that to say I genuinely believe that I learned as much from those first few no formal education years that I had at home with my parents, existing within a very oppressive, non-progressive, closed culture, as I did in the 30 years that followed that. And for this reason, obviously I really value a formal education. I'm so grateful that I was able to have one. It really is a luxury and a privilege, and I give gratitude for it all the time. And I tell my kids all the time how lucky they are to have access. And there are other forms of education, right? And they can impact the way you learn, the way you think, and the approach that you take towards your life just as much as your formal education, if you allow them to. Yeah.
That's such a good sort of undergirding of how you can then, educate yourself, is to have that sense of, a diverse, perspectival way of onboarding information, and also having those humble beginnings or adverse beginnings, humble in the sense that, there was privation around you, and that you had to do the best you could with what you had. So what a crucible to be to emerge from and then move forward. But I love the fact that you were able to take the neuropsychology and marry that into philosophy, and then marry that again into the understanding of the law, which again is a rhetorician's ecosystem of how to do persuasion, or at least be persuasive in your arguments. If you're running into obfuscation on the other side, is that your argument wins the day, or the decision. So what a beautiful amalgamation, in my opinion, in looking into your life and your work, to then have that sense that we could start segueing into empathy and understanding bigger picture issues, and you'd speak to different types of empathy in your book. And how to, and when and how to best utilize these means. So I don't know if you want to segue into the book, or if we want to continue. Let's let you pull something out from maybe the first part of your book, and we'll move into how you do the synthesis of your history, of your educational history, into again these chapters that you created, the book that you created.
Yeah. Well, so one of the core teachings of the book that really strongly relates to my education just as a human being growing up is the distinction between cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. And this is something I talk about in some of my talks as well. From the time I was a child, I essentially watched my parents perform feats of cognitive empathy without getting emotionally entangled. For example, if they were negotiating against an extremely hostile counterpart, such as the morality police, with a vast power imbalance at play, right? It might otherwise seem hopeless. So really all you have at your disposal is the opportunity to understand as much about this individual as you can, while keeping calm, your inner self calm, and your emotional self controlled, so that you could utilize the knowledge that you have about them and essentially behavior science, right, to predict their behavior, so that you could make better, more informed decisions as to what you could say that might persuade them in a situation that could, if it goes awry, get you hurt, get you killed, get your family members hurt, get your family members killed, etc. Versus, say, emotional empathy, which is the way you might react toward your child when there's a missile strike, right? It is certainly not emotionally removed. It's still calm, because your panic will traumatize the child, right? Yeah. And you're not hiding, and you can't hide the missile. It's coming, it's exploding. There's sounds, fire, smells, all the senses, right? So really the idea, though, is to maintain that emotional connection with the human being who, in that instance, you're trying to provide mental stability to. That's the persuasion you're engaged in, right? While maintaining control over your own emotional state, as distinct, and that would be emotional empathy, your pain in my heart, right? The way I talk about it in the book is you could even experience this with a television character. Everyone's had this happen before. Their favorite TV character, or maybe not you, because your favorite TV characters are airplanes that are taking off, but your favorite TV character is, you've been following them for 7 seasons and things have been going terrible for them, but things have finally let up and things are getting better, and they're in a car and it's sunny outside and the birds are chirping and there's great music playing, and suddenly the phone beeps and they look down while they're driving, and you just know, and suddenly they're T-boned by a truck, they spin out of control, there's windows smashing. You don't feel the glass cutting your skin, but you feel pain. You recoil, you physically recoil, and perhaps gasp in response to this happening to your favorite television character. And they're a fictional character on a box in your living room. Okay. So your pain in my heart can be extremely profound on a very, very human level. But now we're distinguishing between that and cognitive empathy, which is you're hostile to me, or I am so responsible for you as your, say, trauma counselor, that I cannot allow myself to be impacted by your trauma in the sense of being traumatized by your trauma, because then I will no longer be able to serve you. Yeah. So I need to understand you. I need to smell what you smell, see what you see, hear what you hear, touch what you touch without walking in your shoes. And that is an extraordinary form of understanding another person, and it's what we call cognitive empathy. This field of psychology calls it cognitive empathy. And so here we have, on the one hand, we have emotional, and on the other hand, we have cognitive. And what's really significant here is that it's really not binary. It's not a binary decision, right? You're never going to be fully cognitive unless you're a sociopath or a robot, and you're never going to be fully emotional without collapsing on the spot. Right. So it's really a spectrum. So one of the things that our education and wisdom teaches us throughout our lives, and hopefully our exposure to philosophical thought and ideology exposes us to, is how do we modulate this spectrum as we relate as human beings to the world around us, whether we're engaged in persuasion or just parenting or just relationships, right? All forms of relationship involve interactions with other people. And so knowing where to be on the spectrum, and then the secondary step, knowing how to get there. How do I modulate myself away from emotional to cognitive and away from cognitive to emotional? How do I determine at any given moment what is an appropriate level of connection for me to have? And obviously this is like walking a tightrope, right? You're always sort of wiggling and balancing and you're just hoping not to fall off the rope. No part of you is steady and smooth in a lot of circumstances. And that therein lies the challenge of life. And that's really how the book starts. The book starts by drawing that distinction between cognitive and emotional empathy, and then talking about the different parts of the brain that are activated during this. And then going into, okay, but how do we do this? How do we actually engage cognitive empathy to understand other people?
Yeah. And at first sight, dry analytical, it does seem like they're disparate, dichotomous ideas, terms, whereas you reference the analogy. And I do love the anecdote in the book about your mother being confronted by that rather hulking woman with the AK-47, and expressing concern over, infractions in the morality code. That's a great, really vivid example of what your mother did to de-escalate and then escape, remove. So that was great in the book. But also when you were speaking to it, I love that you hit on this. We're bad at this in the West, America and Europe, the way we run our social normatives and things. It's like we can't find reciprocity in dichotomy, right? We find that tonos that we can, and sort of as a student of philosophy, this is one thing that you can learn to be good with. But I love that we can keep the evaluative or the cognitive empathy and this real, I hate the word visceral. It's the palpable empathy, which is like a transference, right? You're in the character that's getting assaulted by the accident or whatever. So that we can hold that tension and oscillate. That for me is a great takeaway.
It is an incredible thing about human capacity and capability, and the fact that the option of getting to know the other is available to us under all sets of circumstances is also extraordinary. Because especially in the modern milieu, what you hear a lot is, well, empathy can be a weakness, or, well, empathy is just kumbaya, and empathy is like, lavender candles and burning sage, and it's this sort of way of being that really has nothing to do with the intellectual experience of acquiring or asking. Whereas in fact, that is what it is, right? Empathy is inquiring and then using the knowledge accumulated from the inquiry. And the inquiry can come from a lot of places, right? It can come from your emotions. It can come from your language. It can come from body language. It can come from tone. It can come from so many different things. And one of the things that the book talks about is tools that would enable you to extract even additional information from the situation than you otherwise might have gathered at first blush. Okay, how do I go one level deeper at understanding this person? How do I go 2 levels deeper? How do I go 3 levels deeper? And the remarkable thing about that is that once you are 3 levels deeper than you were an hour ago or 5 minutes ago or whenever it was you began, you now have 3 times as much capability to engage in whatever your goal is, whether your goal was to persuade or to heal or to manage or simply to love. Right. And it is an extraordinary thing to know that no matter what I walk into, no matter what room I enter, right, no matter who's in the room, I have the capability to safely, if I'm careful, learn about these people, these human beings and their complex worlds and perspectives and lives, and come out of this with a greater capability to influence them and a greater ability to understand the world and human nature, because I got in touch with these different perspectives that these people had.
And I might even add that the person that might be poo-pooing, let's say affective empathy, are probably not aware that they're engaging in the cognitive, evaluative, or, I've also heard intellectual empathy, which is a big tool of sociopaths, right? They learn their target. They know how, so that the intrusion can be more welcomed, or whatever's going on in the sociopathic agenda.
100%. 100%. Right. It's also a big tool, though, of the criminologist that catches the sociopath. So, none of this is a statement on morality. And this is really important for me to point out. I'm not proclaiming to be anybody's guru or to teach anybody how to feel or think or moral judgments about the world. The goal of, just because I think that is, unless you've written 75 works of complex philosophy, it is almost an impossible task, especially with this is my first big book. My only big book before this one was fiction. So my goal with this book is just to teach you how to better modulate in response to your own moral values, not to moralize, but to say, if this is who you want to be, if you want to come out of that conversation not wanting to think, I should have said this, I should have done that, right? If you want to live your life with an integrity that allows you to be more consistent with who it is you want to be, this is a good skill set to have at your disposal. I mean, I can talk about morality all the time, but it's really not what the book is about. It's more of a how-to.
No, if there's any reference to morality, and I think that is the latter, like the 9th chapter in the book, it is a sort of checking in with self. It is looking in the mirror, right. And what kind of moral or ethical person do you wish to be? What kind of is it deontological checklist, or is it a more spontaneous list of emotion, empathy based, affectively based or valent based, reciprocity with another person or with a culture, and to speak in a kind of mechanical sense about the book, you employ, and maybe some of the philosophy people would like this, sort of dyadic systems where they're relational, or triadic systems of, again, like the cognitive and the emotional, and employ that with evaluative tools such as mirroring and other tools of psychology to enhance, like you said, the depth, so that you can go a couple layers down. And there are also projects, little exercises that you can do in the book that help to strengthen those intellectual muscles or those cognitive muscles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting because I have a friend who's in the FBI. He's in SWAT, and a lot of these are tools that he utilizes in his interrogations, because the goal of an interrogation at the end of the day is to extract information, right? Mm-hmm. And what they have learned and what they're literally taught now and how they train FBI agents is you are far more likely to get information, accurate, reliable information, right? Because you don't want it to be inaccurate, false information that's given under threat of violence or intimidation. You're far more likely to be able to gain the information utilizing these means. These are also the same tools my therapist uses. I can tell because I go to therapy and she asks me these questions. And what I have found is these are also the same tools that have allowed me to find. I'm not saying I'm the world's most successful person at relationships, but I have been able to create some really incredible, meaningful relationships in my life. And these are the tools I utilize to strengthen those as well.
Yeah. And this comes up in the book because you talk about the but interrogative process and the why interrogative process. And again, to be cliche, there's flies and honey and things like that, and it may not be overt, but sort of the implicit, goal, I guess, of that more subtle and seemingly cooperative, means of extracting information, just makes sense. Because like you said, you could use methods of coercion that may not yield much fruit for you. So why not go for something?
Especially in the context of life. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was a practicing litigator, and I never know whether I should be proud to admit this or ashamed to admit this, but I made more than one person cry on a witness stand. And the way I was able to do that is I very quickly figured out when people are in a confined, controlled setting, court of law, you cannot get up and leave that witness stand unless you are dismissed by the judge, right? And if you do, you could be held in contempt of court and go to jail. Right. And so it's a confined, controlled setting. The individual is obligated, required by law to stay in that seat till you're done with them, as long as you're not behaving in a manner that is inappropriate. This is not relationships. People are not obligated to, it's not even a negotiation, right? Your business counterpart is not obligated. It's not the same thing. So A, B, the person whose mind you need to change isn't the person on the witness stand.
Right.
It's the third party. It's a judge or a jury. Mm-hmm. And this is not the same in a relationship. This is not the same in a negotiation. The person whose mind you're trying to change is the very person with whom you're speaking. So if I figured out very quickly that having a witness on a stand in a confined setting where my goal is to persuade a third party that this person is lying or is unreliable, right? If that is my goal, which is always my goal with the counterpart's witnesses, right? If that is my goal, I figured out really quickly, all I have to do is catch him in a lie. Yeah. One lie. One simple, it could even be meaningless. It could be it was raining that day, but it wasn't. It was sunny and it has nothing to do with the facts of the case. All I got to do is catch you on one lie. And if you're in that setting, you get so frustrated and embarrassed by the lie that where you behave on the witness stand communicates to the judge and the jury that you're not reliable. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, that's what litigation is, right? My witness is more reliable than your witness. Everyone's got a witness. Everyone's got a witness. And so again, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if I should be proud or ashamed to admit this, but this is something that I did as a litigator and that I was really quite good at. And I realized that this context, forget about the morality of it for a moment. This context is not transferable. It can be, but in extremely rare cases. When it comes to life, when it comes to our spouses, our children, our parents, our business partners, our employees, our bosses, it is a very different persuasion scenario. And reducing the other person to a wreck of a human being is not useful. It's again, we're putting aside the moral judgment here for a second. I'm not saying there isn't a moral judgment to be made. I'm just saying, let's just put it aside for a second. What is the goal, right? The goal is to advance the relationship, or the goal is to convince your husband to go to your parents' house for Christmas, or the goal is, you know what I mean? The goal is to live your life in a manner that is more compatible with what you want and what works for your circumstances and your environment. And if that is the goal, then you need to take an approach that keeps in mind the value of the relationship itself as a fundamental pre-aspect of the dialogue. Once you intuitively take that into all of your conversations, everything changes. And then you start to move away from, but why did you say this? Right? Because that's not going to yield an answer in that context. And it's not going to be useful just to throw that person off their game. It's not you versus them. Even in a merger or acquisition, in a purely corporate situation, it's still not you versus them. It's really not. It's more about the post-merger integration and how we can go make a lot of money together. I mean, that is what it is in that corporate context.
Yeah. And you cite a reference similar to that in the book about a clasp making company and a purse making company, or a bag making company, and this sort of negotiation that goes on, and it's more wise than buts, I guess, to go back to that for a second, and that, you know, the persuasion convinces a rather large clasp maker who could easily be indifferent to a small startup or small company making handbags. You know, why should I care about, you know, or why should I be invested in our relationship? You know, we have plenty of business. And so that the act of persuasion is say, well, we're very concerned about, either standing out from the competitors or having our sort of proprietary aesthetic or whatever it is. So that was a great example. And if I could respond to a couple things that you had mentioned, I think when you talk about not turning this type of energy onto those that we are in personal relationships with, that is a good calculus time for calculus in the Sophrosine, or the prudence of the affective empathy versus the evaluative cognitive empathy rather, right? So when you're in court, you're using that tool of cognitive or calculative evaluative empathy, but also so tangent. I wouldn't worry about making people cry, because if they cried, it's because they were caught in a lie, or they, you know, as long as you don't take personal pleasure and satisfaction in it, right? It's more. The goal
isn't to make this person rattled, right? That is not the goal. The goal is to reach, a solution between the two of you that is workable and acceptable to both of you, while fostering your relationship on a long-term basis. And so there you start to get into, typically when people start to discuss empathy, they are talking about affective empathy. It's very rare that people focus on cognitive empathy. And my book does a lot of work on cognitive empathy, not because it's more valuable, just because it's in my opinion, it's understudied. And so I wanted to get it out there more. It is important, and it's not really a huge aspect of the book, but I do want to keep in mind, it is also very important to influence people by virtue of your emotional connection to them. Right? That is a massive source of influence, right? You too should be thus influenced, by the way, or you don't have any meaning in your life whatsoever. And so that's not something we go into in the book a lot, but we have to acknowledge that can be equally, if not more powerful. It's just, in my opinion, in the empathy related literature, it is far more explored upon than the cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy is an essential component of the spectrum, which we earlier discussed, and in fact can be an essential component even if of your affective empathy interactions. And so I felt that the literature needed this addition to be made to it, and that's why I focused on that. Again, not a value judgment. No. And again, speaking to systems, reciprocal systems and functional systems, that if you have a dyadic or triadic system that is in good functionality, and you use that as a cognitive tool or a
technology or tool or whatever to engage as someone in the marketplace, as someone in a business structure, or if you're self-employed, or if you're part of a larger system of business. And you cite an example. It was Anne, I believe, in the book. You were talking about, Anne's really kind of just falling by the wayside in the back of the room in the meeting. And so Anne took active steps by reading, I believe you said that she had read your book, hired a mentor, or found a mentor within outside of her immediate sphere, but also in the system, in the company, and then was able to get some coaching and other things. And this person was able to develop themselves and reapproach their relationship with X, Y, and Z persons in the company to have a greater standing and a greater presence and a greater impact that would only benefit Anne in their trajectory in the business, right?
100%. And I love the language you used there, which was the word greater, right? Are you ever going to be able to win every single argument, negotiation you have ever entered into, or search yourself in an imperative manner? It is really about, how do I take that next step and do it in a way that comports with my value system, so that I can come home at the end of the day and feel like I'm living the life that I want to be living, right? And we've all, maybe you haven't, I won't speak for you. I've definitely been in emotional places where I felt, no, I'm not. It's either not enough of this, or it's too much of that, or this was just plain wrong, right? And shouldn't have happened. And I have had those experiences, not from I'm going to beat myself up for 6 months point of view, but from okay, well, tomorrow I'd like to live my life more in accordance with my value system and my integrity than I did yesterday. And again, it doesn't mean I'm going to achieve perfection, right? It's really more of a practice and a growth than an achievement of a particular skill set. And so it is, here are the tools, here are the skills, here's the philosophical underpinning to allow you on a day-by-day basis to get progressively closer, and therefore progressively more persuasive, and therefore progressively more powerful in the ways in which power really matters in this life.
And if we could, I'll throw a philosophical term in. So if we step out of persuasion and rhetoric and the relationship with the interlocutor in that sense, in the rhetorical sense, you'd bring in the other tool of the dialectic, which is more of a good faith argumentation, wherein there really is no prize, there is no gain to be had other than that of advancing the idea or bettering perhaps the interlocutor's position, bettering yours over theirs, perhaps, but not for the sake of your advancement. I almost think that what you're teaching in this book would be good for dialectic as well. That it primes you to go in good faith, to not advantage yourself over the interlocutor so much, but to seek that truthiness that could arise out of, you're arguing over X, but you don't need to win and they don't need to win. You want the idea to advance itself, and to be furthered by that. So I'm just riffing here for a second, but I think that the tools that you're teaching in this book would also be good for that mode of human, discourse or dialogue or whatever you want to call it, and argumentation. Is that it's outside of the rhetorical realm where I'm not trying to really persuade or influence my interlocutor. I care enough with them, and I enter into the philia form of love that I want that subject, whatever it is we're discussing, to prosper.
To find to emerge, right? To come to life in front of me. And I want to give it the space and the room that it needs to breathe. And what's one of the things that I think about as someone who is trained in analytical thinking, as someone who has a hard time with active listening. I teach active listening. I have a really hard time with active listening. Is silence. And the significance of silence amidst dialogue. And how often not speaking enables you to learn more than speaking. And, not in an awkward, I'm just going to be silent while you talk to me until you freak out and leave sort of way. But the introduction of the dynamic beat of silence into the dialectic and the exercise, the intentional exercise of silence. Why? Because I am considering it. I am thinking about it. Or why? Because I want you to consider it. Or I want you to think about it. Or the third why, the answer to the third why, which is because it's fucking uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes that discomfort creates space for the truth to emerge and come to life right in front of you. And it is an extraordinary thing to see. Again, like if you've seen it, if you've been there, and suddenly everybody takes an emotional step back and a cognitive step forward, and things are unearthed that were not unearthed a minute ago when you were in the heat of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right?
Yeah. And I think there's an implicit gesture to your interlocutor, if you do enter into that silent space for a moment, that you are doing intentional and attentional listening, and that they can, again, this may be under the board a little bit, but that they may be thinking to themselves, so this person's not just knee-jerk, boop, 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 like rapid fire coming back at me. They're taking a moment. That means they actually listened and gave a shit about what I was saying. So there is a bridge building there as well, but it's also building that tension. And then they're like, what's the next move going to be? So there's a couple things I love that. Yeah, that things are happening there in that void, in that so-called negative space.
Right. Exactly. It's a very full negative space, if you will.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. A pregnant space, as they say. So.
I love that. The pregnant pause.
Because what could come from that, right? What could be birthed out of that? And that's what again, it's a midwifery between two people, to, as you said, bring forward, a truth or a whatever, whatever's going on. If it's propositional, perhaps a truth. But anyway, Shermin,
if you think about it, I know you're trying to wrap up because I have to go, which is so nice, which is so kind of you. But I did want to add, I get excited.
No.
So I did want to add, when you think about it, that is what you really want in a negotiation. Mm-hmm. You do want the underlying truth, right? If there's resistance to whatever it is I'm proposing, I do need to really understand that resistance and the why behind it and the story behind it and the why behind that. Why? So that I can either accept that resistance and move on, or make the decision to continue to fight against that resistance, but now in a more informed manner, right? Mm-hmm. That truth is really what we want anyway. Yeah. And this is all, of course, assuming that it exists in an objective way, but you don't need to make that assumption. Right. We're just unearthing and information is coming up like plants growing out of the soil. Mm-hmm. It is coming up and we are nourishing it. And that is the utilization of empathy in really almost all relationship contexts that I promote.
Yeah. Don't you love it? Now, so here's a tension that I love. We're canalizing here. We're hitting a groove, but then we're going to stop. So
after these messages,
right? Perhaps to be continued. So if you had a good experience, maybe behind the scenes we can set up another date, get together.
Absolutely, I would love that.
Further this conversation, because you touched on a lot of things in your book, and so again, to the audience. I will have links to access the book, your website. I'll make sure that everything is there and available. And if you get the book and read it, and then you can come back for a second conversation, audience member, that you can follow along, and we may dance like we did today, and not like chapter 1, chapter 2, this is sort of linear fashion, which is okay. But, I think what we did today was wonderful. I very much appreciate you as a guest and the work that you're presenting. And I look forward to more creation from you, whether it's linguistic or you continue to, forge a path of creation in the direction that this book puts you in, or, the trajectory that you were in with this one. So there's so much to stay tuned for, I think, is how we could some summative kind of statement. Now, speaking of summative, is there anything last thing you want to say before we go ahead and part for this one? And then
I don't know. I kind of like the stay tuned for the conclusion of.
That's right.
Really, again, typically this is what I say in the summative when I'm wrapping up is no part of me is proclaiming to be in any way intellectually, morally, or thoughtfully superior I make. So one of the things I talk about in the book a lot is all the mistakes, right? Really, the goal is the journey and the growth. And if we're dedicated to it, then we can achieve a higher state of being, really, theoretically, every moment of our lives, right? We can achieve a higher state of being, at least on the average, on that tightrope of life. And all I'm hoping to do, audience, is to offer you a roadmap. It's well researched, well analyzed, of a way that this can be done, that works. And it really does work. It really does allow you to move up the steps. And it has worked for me. And so please take it all with some grace towards yourself and forgiveness towards yourself as well as you read through.
Yeah. And so one summative statement from me is I'm a neophyte with Stoicism, and this book was a great entree for me to understand some of what's going on again in maybe the later Greek work that was the Greek Stoics that we're working with. So you did an excellent job importing that into the book, and then bringing it into very practical and real examples, etc. So it's very well woven into the book. That's something that really turned me on and had me appreciating what you had endeavored to create. So I'll add that as a personal testimony, is that it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's going to be the second half of the book, basically.
Yeah, I think so. And so, yeah, we'll unearth a lot. And I'm already cultivating questions in my mind, so I'll try to write them down, because whenever I don't want to forget them. So anyway, Shermin, thank you. Thank you. Well, I love when I'm not rattling all over the place. I love to ask questions. So anyway,
great.
Thank you for your presence and for the book that you wrote, and for sharing time with myself and the audience. I'll say goodbye to you when I stop record, but to the YouTube and Spotify audience, thank you also very much. And
bye, everyone. Thank you.
That's right. Bye-bye. And I'll make sure I'll do my best to get Shermin back here, and we'll have another conversation. So take care, everyone.